Okay, so hello to everyone that is watching, and thank you. Thanks for listening. Before I get too carried away, I just want to say thank you very much to Roger from the Expedition Project. Thanks for including us and for giving me the opportunity to test my technological skills. Hope it doesn't go too badly. But seriously, I think it's a very cool idea, this whole live stream thing, keeping us in touch with other people within our industry, and especially now within these strange times, for us to be able to share knowledge and ideas and basically to be working together. So yeah, thank you. So just to give you a rough outline of what my talk is going to be about, I will start with myself, just a little bit of background, and then the focus will be on the organization that I work for, the Amakhala Foundation. So I'll cover a little bit of just general stuff, and then I'll be talking to you mostly about the programs that we usually run, and which I really enjoy being a part of, and then how this whole lockdown has affected our work and our programs, and so how things have had to change. And then, yeah, hopefully there'll be some time for questions. So, yeah. So for those of you that do not know me, my name is Tammy, and I work for the Amakhala Foundation. Obviously, I am currently an environmental education coordinator. It's quite a mouthful, or just the environmental educator. That's a little bit easier. But I have spent the last 7 years shifting or kind of being torn between conservation, ecology, and then also the community or environmental education side. So I've been quite lucky in that I've been able to combine both of my passions, which is wildlife and then also working with kids. So I'm very grateful for that. That's just a little bit about me. To get to the important stuff. So the Amakhala Foundation, if you haven't heard of us, we are an NPO. We're based on Amakhala Game Reserve in the Eastern Cape. And we are run by a group or a board of trustees. Last year was our 10th year, so it was our 10-year anniversary. So yeah, we've been going for quite a while. Yeah, just a little bit of background. I do believe there will be a follow-up talk by two of the other trustees. So they'll talk to you in more detail about the bigger picture behind the foundation and also about our literacy projects. Excuse me. Then, so yeah, that's the foundation. What do we do? So there's a couple of, we can call them pillars or sections that we are involved with. I'm not going to be speaking in detail about all of them, but I'll just name them, and then I'll be focusing mostly on one of those. So we are involved with literacy projects, community conservation projects, which is mostly supporting existing conservation projects on the reserve. We do some skills development, and then mostly what I'll be focusing on is the environmental education side of things, as that's the section that I'm the most actively involved with. So I'm quite excited to tell you guys about all the different programs that we run. But before I do that, I just want to stop and emphasize or point out the why it's important and why we do it, or why I believe it is. And so to explain that, I just want to draw on two of my favorite quotes of all time. I use them maybe too much. The first one is by David Suzuki, and he says something along the lines of, unless we are willing to encourage our children to appreciate and reconnect with the natural world, we can't expect them to protect and care for it. That's the first one. And the second one, we will conserve only what we love, we'll love only what we understand, and we'll understand only what we are taught. I think those two quotes really summarize it for me, the why we do what we do and why it is so important. But for me, on a personal level, I feel like it's quite an important task that I have to address what is, in my opinion, quite a big problem nowadays, and that's this huge gap that we've created and that continues to grow between us and the natural world, the outdoors. And so when I was growing up, I remember climbing trees and playing in the sand and sleeping under the stars and trying to figure out which trees you could, or not trees, but which fruit you could eat and throw your friends with, and discovering bugs. And that was great. And nowadays what I see is mostly kids on their cell phones, YouTube videos, TV, and not that those things are not fun or important, because I also enjoy them, but in much smaller doses, and yeah, much less in my childhood. So anyway, what I'm getting to is, I think the big task that we have as people that do what I do is to make some kind of effort to bridge this gap. And this doesn't only apply to kids, although that's what I mostly work with, but yeah, it applies to all of us. So I'm sure I'm not going to cover exactly all of our programs, but I'm hoping to cover some of my favorites and the ones that come to mind first. I'll start with, there's a couple of environmental holidays which we celebrate, and we do so by inviting our local kids from grade 1 to grade 3. So these are for the days Arbor Day, Water Day, and World Environment Day. And so we invite them for a morning away from school, out of the classroom, and we teach them various, based on different themes. There's lots of different lessons and activities. So for example, healthy rivers would fall under Water Day, one of our themes. Excuse me. And so basically we try to design the program in such a way that they get to do things differently, to the usual in the classroom. It's more interactive. They get to use their hands and use their senses and have fun and go back with some cool memories. Those are probably my favorite days to plan. And maybe just to give you one silly example, for last year's Arbor Day, we had the theme of Albany thickets. And so we had different lessons about species within Albany thicket that are important. And one of the activities was just to go for a walk within the reserve where there were no predators, to go and identify, and for the kids to see with their own eyes, like different adaptations that all the different trees have, to thrive within their biome, pointing out different thorns and how they store and save water, etc. Basic things, but just to see it with their own eyes and to figure it out themselves. And then another thing that we do within that, one of the species that we focus on is the dung beetle, and also the African elephant, etc. But for the dung beetle one, apart from having a story or actual lesson about it, I have a bucket of dung that I've collected over the past or over the previous days, and then I actually get them to roll the dung balls themselves. So that always proves to be quite entertaining. And although some of the girls might complain on the day, they always go back telling their teachers how much fun they had. And I think those kind of memories are important. Anyway, so that's just some of the days which we celebrate every year. So those are set programs. And the schools that attend are mostly Sidbury Primary School, Lucy Biso, Alexandria, who am I leaving out? And sometimes the Naha. So those are our closest schools, and they're quite small, mostly farming schools. Then what else? We run a nature club. We do this in Grahamstown, working with the Rhodes University Community Engagement, and also in Paterson, and that's just with a few, actually like one or two local volunteers. I think Nature Club is pretty self-explanatory, but one of the bigger or underlying long-term goals of this program is to identify individuals within those groups that have the potential to complete their FAGAS and Nature Enthusiasts certificate, which is quite an important stepping stone towards achieving a guiding qualification, if that is something that they're interested in. So that's Nature Club. What else? One of my favorites, apart from those big days which I get to plan, but one of the most fun and strenuous programs is we run an expedition with St. Andrews in Grahamstown, and that's quite a big endeavor. It basically involves the boys being split into smaller groups, and we have various different bases or points on the reserve and close to, including like in Patterson, and each group spends some time, like 24 hours at a base, and so they rotate, and so they end up doing almost a week of this expedition, and every base will have a different focus, different theme, different activities. So for instance, at one of the camps they sleep in a river line, they get to learn to fish, learn astronomy, and then at another base they are in Patterson, helping to build things, helping to serve in the soup kitchen, etc. So very different, but to create an overall experience which is which has a big impact on them. Then there is a program called Coaching for Conservation, or I think they've just changed the name to Coaching Conservation, but we partner with them to facilitate a program which teaches conservation lessons and themes, but uses soccer as a medium, which is, I think, quite a clever way, especially working with the rural schools. Soccer is something that they can relate to, and so it's much easier to get them to relate to a rhino, for instance, when you're using soccer. And of course, it's very fun. So that's Coaching for Conservation. There's so many actually, but something I haven't mentioned, I suppose, is that all of our programs are unique and they cater for different ages, different schools. So I've mentioned high school, foundation phase. We do also have an animal adventures program, which is for our youngest kids, and that is quite a simple and mostly fun program. It would be something as simple as teaching a 5-year-old that a cheetah runs fast, so getting them to do a relay race to practice running how to run, or practicing how to run fast. Yeah, I think that is a good summary. I don't want to talk too much or too long. The other programs that we have are not all necessarily set, and ones that we do every year, some of them are designed specially as we get the requests for, might just be an outing. So for some of the programs, it is literally just a fun outing, a game drive. The focus is on providing some kids with their first ever wildlife encounter, and hopefully planting some good seeds there. All right, so that's a bit of a summary of the programs we usually run. Now, as you guys all know, we're stuck in lockdown, and so basically we've had to shift our focus from usually putting in the most time and energy into environmental education, and now we've had to focus more on, or we've chosen to focus more on the immediate needs of the community. So what we've been up to since the start of lockdown is, well, it started with just something small, and that was, it became clear that some community members couldn't find their own transport to town, whether it be for pension grants or medication. So we just started assisting with that. Then what became more important was providing masks. So we brainstormed our team, and eventually came up with, or we went through various different designs. I'm going to show you one in a sec, just for fun. But we made some masks, and in other cases we made a mask kit, which we distributed, and so people were able to put their own mask together. And so up until now, I think the last update we've made almost 400 masks, and that's gone to Amakhala staff, Amakhala community members, and then also to the Patterson community. And Patterson, for those of you that don't know, is our closest little town. And so with the help of the Isipo Charity Trust, we were able to distribute those masks to Patterson. So yeah, almost 400 masks. We went through different designs. This is the first and most fancy design, and then from here it got a little bit more simple so we could make more quicker. But just to amuse you, that was our first design. Thank you to my boss. Okay, so that's the masks. And then the next need that arose is our kids sitting at home with nothing to do and falling behind with schoolwork. So we started by just getting the school books to the learners from Sudbury Primary School, which is our closest school and which we support. And then we started just with supplying some form of worksheets to keep them at least busy with something, something a bit more stimulating. And then slowly now with time, we've got the help of the teachers at Sudbury Primary School, and so they're actually coming up with proper curriculum-based worksheets, and we're supplying those on a weekly basis, so that hopefully the kids can keep up a little bit with their schoolwork. Yeah, so that's mostly what we've been up to. Usually the conservation center, which is where our classroom lies, where a lot of our programs take place, we usually see over 2,000 visitors in a year. Obviously those numbers have dropped drastically now, but for us, although the focus of what we do has changed, and that's maybe not ideal, I would say that there's still been a lot of positives out of this coronavirus situation. For me, it's meant that there's been time to rethink how we do things and to reflect and to plan. So I have a lot more time to plan and improve on my future programs. And I think it's been a necessary reminder for things that we often take for granted, and forced us to be, or to remember what we should be grateful for. So yeah, I don't want to focus only on the negatives. We basically have been just trying to adapt to the situation as it arises, to do what we can under the circumstances. So yeah, I think I've mentioned pretty much everything that I want to. Maybe something I didn't mention is that just where we fit in relation to the previous talks. So as I mentioned, we are based on Amakhala Game Reserve, which is where Brad and Dwayne spoke from. And then the Amakhala volunteers, they're very useful to us when it comes to especially those big environmental days, which involves quite a big group of kids. So they are one of our main helpers, volunteers. So they are often involved with these programs as well. Okay, so I think we'll be moving on to any questions that you guys may have. Okay, so the first question I can see is from Hein. He's asking, do we teach them how to do veggie gardens and other self-sustainable skills? So I mentioned that one of our departments is skills development. So yes, there have been veggie garden attempts in the past. The problem is that they haven't always succeeded in the long run, and that's often because of there's quite often one important driver behind a project, and when that person loses interest or moves on, then there's a gap and there's not somebody to follow up. So there have been things like that. Some of the other sustainable skills that we I wouldn't say teach, but which we've helped with is, for instance, our craft center, which allows ladies to they do sewing and beading. So they've been able to develop that skill and make a living out of it. So they've been able to generate income by selling these products such as bracelets and necklaces and things at our craft center. Yeah, I know for us personally, we've started our own veggie garden at the conservation center, and I know a lot of people on the reserve are doing that because it's the perfect time to do stuff like that. Sure, a lot of questions from the expedition project, and they look like good ones. So, how do you think you can bridge the gap more between young people and conservation or nature? So, that's a tough one, but for me, I mean, that's a complicated. I think it has a complicated solution. It's not that simple, but you know, based on my quotes and stuff, the first thing is that if people don't know any better, or they don't know what an elephant looks like, or how many species of moths there are, or whatever the case may be, the things they don't know about, they obviously can't care about. So I think for us, it's just trying to provide more and more opportunities to for them to be able to connect in such a way. And that's not always just by means of a game drive. I mean more personal experiences like camping out, and yeah. So I think things like camps would be a better start, and not, well, in places where you can get completely away from humanity, I'd like to say. But yeah, maybe that's a bit pie in the sky. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help teaching people about things when they can't see or experience it for themselves. I think that's one of the problems. So even if you do, you know, in biology or natural science, you might learn about some of these things, but it's not the same as actually seeing and feeling it for yourself and creating a personal connection. Teenagers, how somebody is asking, or the expedition project is asking, how have you found the best way to engage teenagers in conservation? I think the majority of our work is with younger kids, so I don't have as much experience with that. But for me personally, especially with the teenagers from my area, when you can link the conservation to what would we call it? Like their history, like with regards to the Bushmen, where they came from, like practical skills like making a fire and hunting for themselves. When there's that kind of link, or if that's included in the in your conservation efforts, I've found that they tend to be more interested, something that they can relate to better. I think because their culture is so important to them. Do Amakhala sponsor or help fundraise any local community members through qualifications in conservation? Yes, so one of the banners that I mentioned, as I said, is skills development, and under that we do one of the ways in which we do that is we sponsor, for instance, our Sudbury Primary School. There are bursaries available. There's also bursaries available for community members to study through FUGASA to get their field guiding qualification. So we sponsor one, or the reserve sponsors one per FUGASA course, and we're quite lucky to have Ulavani environmental training just next door. So it's very easy for us. And we've had a guy that started with the Isipo Multipurpose Center. He worked with us, and he did end up getting a qualification and actually working for our anti-poaching unit. So there's quite a few cool stories like that, yes. Are there any specific campaigns within environmental education that you are trying to fundraise for? There's many campaigns. Basically, because of lockdown, we are running on saved funds, and so we can operate within the short term, but we do need to acquire more external funding for the long run for all of our programs, not for a specific campaign, but to keep all of the things that I've just mentioned running. If I wasn't doing this job or anything related to conservation, what would I be doing? I would be, well, as a kid, I thought I wanted to become a vet, but I realized at a later stage that I didn't have the, how can I say, the guts for it. I'm too much of a softie. So if I wasn't in conservation, I think I would still be in something similar, and that would be like animal care, even if it was working at a SPCA or something. Or apparently there's a job where you can be a professional cat petter or carer on some island. That would be my dream job. Yeah. Okay. It's almost 30 minutes, so I'm going to give a few more minutes for any more questions. If not, I will be wishing you guys a good night. And yeah, I know I haven't maybe answered your questions 100% thoroughly, and I can always follow up with a little bit more facts at a later stage. Okay. Another question. What international volunteer skills would be really useful for you? What we find with those environmental holidays that we celebrate, where we rely, or where the Amakhala volunteers are usually very important. With those days, the first and most basic thing is having good English. Sometimes it's a little bit trickier when, obviously, when there's a language barrier, because also often with these kids, English is not their first language. But mostly I don't know if you can call it a skill, but the most important thing is them being able to be comfortable with the kids, to be enthusiastic, to be patient, and to be able to put themselves on their level, not be afraid to be silly. You need to remember what it's like to be a kid. Yeah, but I think enthusiasm and passion and energy, yeah, working with kids, I think those are some of the most important skills. Someone's asking about final say optimism post-corona or after corona. Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully once all of this is done, we've had all of this time now, we should have made good use of this time to, as I mentioned, to be reflecting and rethinking, and hopefully not just going back to the way that we used to do things. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly how, but I hope that we'll be able to do that. Okay, I think you guys have heard enough from me for now. So if there's any more questions, I will happily answer them in the comments at a later stage. So yeah, thank you to everyone who has watched or who will still watch this. And thanks again to Roger for providing the opportunity to speak to you guys. All right. Thanks, guys. Goodbye.